Hey everybody, it's Kelly. Welcome back to another episode of Ask a Therapist. Today I want to talk to you about 5 things that make people afraid to leave the church. Specifically, religion in general, but we're talking about specifically the church. If you go back to one of my recent videos, it caused a bit of a stir when I talked about fear and how the church, religion in general, but the church uses fear. And if you read through the comments, it resonated with some people and also brought up some things in some other people. And it got me thinking, why are some people afraid to leave the church? And why do we stick around in fairly abusive situations? Really, it comes down to generally 5 things. I very much want to be clear, these are in no particular order. These are just the order that they're written down in, okay? Not an order of priority. Let's start with number 1, losing friends. When you have cultivated your understanding of yourself and your social circle within a church atmosphere, when you leave, you don't get to take that with you. Because if your social life is going to Bible studies, going to church dinners, going to social events or trips or retreats with these people, they are going to keep doing it after you leave, but you're not. So how do you continue to be in relationship or in fellowship with them after you've gone if you're not doing those things with them anymore? Like, just on a logistical level, you don't get to continue those friendships in the same way anymore because you don't have access to them in the same way anymore. You stop having as much in common with them because the things that are going on in your life are not the same things going on in their lives. You don't have as much to talk about anymore. It's kind of like, have you ever left a job and you thought you had these really great friends? You talk to them all of the time. Once you leave the job, you're not as good of friends with them anymore. And you're like, wait a minute, I thought we were great friends. But in reality, the job was the thing that kept you close together. When that commonality is the thing keeping you together and you don't make the transition outside of it to have other things in common that do not center that entity, it's hard to continue those friendships once you've gone. In addition to that, there's that rhetoric that happens constantly within religion, that those who are outside of it don't understand the inside. Even within the churches that are more understanding to people who are not believers, there's still generally a rhetoric around this idea that they are not us, they're a them. And eventually the us-them dynamic takes a toll on friendships. So this idea that you will soon become the them that you, when you were us, always looked at differently. When you start to conceptualize that for yourself while you're deciding whether you should leave or not, that can get scary. In fact, the fear of that can keep you in a situation you do not want to be in much longer than you know you should. Because when you're left with a choice of, I can leave and live how I want to live, but be lonely, or I can stay and live how I've been living and have these friends, this choice is going to win out a lot, very often. Number 2, losing family. If your family is full of believers of this religion and you leave, what does that do to your relationship with your family? Maybe it doesn't do anything like at first, but what happens when you have holidays? What happens when you go to see your family and they're going to a worship service? Or there's a religious celebration, like there's a celebration centered on a religious holiday or a religious act, a communion, a confirmation, a some sort of religious act that the family is getting around to celebrate. What do you do in those moments? Do you attend even though you don't believe? Do you tell them you're not going to attend because you don't believe? How do you handle those things with your family? Does your family decide to have an intervention if you stop going to services? Do they care? Do they know? Do you tell them if you don't live near them? These are all questions that people who are going to leave a religion, especially one they've grown up in, where their family is going to stay, you've got to start thinking about those things, and those things can be super scary to think about. The idea of disapproval of family keeps people in places they don't want to be for a very long time. It keeps us in jobs. It keeps us in relationships. It keeps us in the closet for much longer than we ever need to be. Of course, it's going to keep us in religions longer than we really care to be. If you are afraid of losing your family, what would you do to keep them? Like, what parts of you would you give away and what parts of you would not give away? It's not like you're asking yourself to do something that you're not already doing, right? It's not like you're asking yourself to join a religion you're not already in. So if you're thinking about leaving and then you start to think,
oh, my family might not be okay with me leaving.
The idea of staying isn't like changing anything, right? The leaving is what's changing something. You can see why that fear would keep people where they are. All right, let's talk about number 3, self-doubt. This one is one that doesn't get talked about a lot. And I think it doesn't get talked about a lot because when you talk about it, people either take it the wrong way or take advantage of it. There's this idea within Christian circles that if you can walk away from a religion you never actually believed. And that is said a lot, like, a lot. The reason behind this idea, it makes the people who stay feel better because they don't have to then dig into, well, how come this person walked away? Like, I thought we were in the same level. I thought we were doing this thing together. I thought all these different things. If this person can walk away, am I doing the wrong thing? Should I be walking away? Do I need to look at this differently? All of those doubts that they then have, they can put them in a box if they can just help themselves to understand, well, this person never really believed in the first place. Makes sense, right? It's not true, by the way. You can truly believe something and then decide that you need to walk away from it or that you don't believe it anymore. It doesn't mean you didn't believe truly when you believed. The thing about this self-doubt fear is that when abusive leaders are involved in your faith life, they will make you think that anything you've done against them is your fault. Not that they've had anything to do with it, not that they've shirked their responsibilities for support or validation or understanding in any way. It's always your fault. You didn't have enough faith. You didn't have enough confidence. You didn't pray enough. You didn't think through things enough. It's always on you. And that's the way this leadership piece works in order to instill fear in their congregation in order to keep them to stay. See this other video, right? But when you've been sort of ruled over like that, the idea of leaving is going to fill you with self-doubt. Those fears are going to come back to you and you're going to start thinking, well, yeah, I don't feel like this is true anymore, or maybe I don't feel like this is a place I should be anymore. But also, what if I'm wrong? And I get out there and I realize that I'm wrong. And all of these things that I've heard about, like people who leave, you're never going to welcome me back. And I'm never going to have an option to sort of revisit this in a different kind of way. So once I've left, I'm gone. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. So I better stay until I'm sure. But how are you going to be sure inside of the entity that makes you doubt yourself? Right? So you've got this like cycle of I'm doubting myself so I can't leave, but I can't leave because I'm going to doubt myself when I leave. Like you can't ever get out of that cycle then, but that's by design. Like that's the design to keep you there. Takes us to number 4, judgment. There's so much judgment. There's so much judgment. And that fear of judgment is very, very real and very intense. First, you've got judgment from other Christians. Like I said before,
if you were able to leave, you were never Christian.
It is very hard to find anyone who's been in any way public about their problems with the church that hasn't had a Christian come at them with judgment, with vitriol, for no other reason than you had the audacity to tell your opinion. That in and of itself can be scary for someone who's first trying to figure out who they are outside of all of this baggage that they've been given from religion, from the people who are supposed to protect them and teach them and love them unconditionally, and be this symbol of undying love from this person that they claim to worship. On that note, it just never has ever made sense to me why any Christian ever has found it necessary to, in general, attack someone who is just trying to figure out deconstruction for themselves, except that it makes them afraid that what they're standing on can't stand. Because if what you're standing on can stand, you don't have to come at somebody who's questioning it for themselves. You can just go about your business and stand on what you're standing on, right? It doesn't have anything to do with you. And that then expands into judgment from the world as a whole. If you spent any time within Christian circles, and if you've ever been the person to do drive-by comments on someone's YouTube video, or had conversations with friends about what they're doing or how they're living their life or anything like that, and then you come out of the church and you are living a life the way you want to live it. Like, how do those people who knew you as a Christian before respond to that? How do the people who were outside of the Christian world and then see you, how do they see you now? Does that matter? Like, sometimes it does. Sometimes Sometimes you don't know how to answer them when they ask, like, well, what happened to you? Those judgments can also be scary. And then you've got that judgment that not everybody talks about. The first two are so easy to talk about. This last one is so hard. And it's a judgment from self. We talk about wasted time, this idea of wasted time. We talk about coming out later in life. And we don't talk about it a lot when we're talking about leaving the church. But when you have put so much energy and so much time into something that you believe in so wholeheartedly, and that thing has essentially let you down in such a way that you can't stay, that time and energy that you put in, where did it go? Like, was it a waste? Was it still time well spent because it made you who you are? Like, can you get behind that idea right away? That judgment that you're putting on yourself in those moments is hard. And that takes us into number 5, which is that fear of losing connection with that spiritual high and those times that you did feel something. And I know this doesn't apply to everybody, but I do think this applies to more people than maybe are willing to admit out loud. For a lot of us, there really isn't a denying that, like, there were times when things happened emotionally for us in those spaces. And whether it was like exhaustion and just like feeling close with our friends at youth camp, or it was like convincing ourselves that we were hearing something, we're really just listening to our own intuition. There are times that there's connection to other things and to other people that's intense. And we tell ourselves that it has a certain meaning when we're doing church work, when we're in a religion. And whatever that means to you, like, where do you put that when you're leaving? Do you put it in a, I don't know what to do with this column? Do you put it in a, I must have been cuckoo column? Do you just throw it like in the back of your closet and shut the door and not deal with it? I'm going to tell you, there's no wrong answer to that question, but it is a question that needs to be answered. If you are somebody who had some sort of experience emotionally during that time that you were in a religion, and I'll deal with it later is a fine answer, you just have to be aware of that, right? Like, you don't have to use that to stay, but you do need to acknowledge that for yourself. Because when you don't acknowledge that and you don't address that for yourself, if that happened for you, that's when you start to feel like you're doing something wrong. That's when you start to feel like there's something you're hiding or something you're running from, and there's not. You making a decision to leave a religious situation that isn't working for you is the right thing to do when it's the right thing to do for you. And you shouldn't have to second guess that based on any of these fears or judgments. But they're very real in a lot of people's lives. We make decisions for ourselves when we are ready to make those decisions. There's no right time or wrong time for that to happen. Your process gets to be your process. But all of these fears are very fair to have, and also yours to work through in your timing. So really the purpose of this entire video is to help you to understand that if you have any of these fears, it is very understandable and also not insurmountable if you want to get past them. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you all next time. And until then, take care of yourselves and each other.